Join me as I explore the chilling secrets hiding in Old Town Cemetery. Can I uncover the creepiest stories before the sun sets? This place has an eerie reputation, and many believe it holds secrets that are just waiting to be uncovered. People often whisper about the strange happenings and ghost sightings that have taken place within these crumbling walls. Rumors of unexplained phenomena have circled around this cemetery for years, with many claiming to have seen shadowy figures darting between the tombstones. Some have even reported hearing disembodied voices and strange noises that seem to come from nowhere. The air is thick with an unsettling energy that makes you feel like you're being watched. Many visitors have attempted to explore the cemetery after dark, only to flee in terror after experiencing something that can't be explained. These encounters have become the stuff of local legend, with some even claiming that the cemetery is a hub of paranormal activity. As the night draws in, the atmosphere becomes even more charged, and it's easy to see why so many people are drawn to this place. The history of the cemetery is steeped in mystery, with many notable figures buried within its walls. Some of these individuals have fascinating stories that have been passed down through the years, and it's said that their spirits still linger. There have been numerous reports of ghostly apparitions and inexplicable events that have been documented over the years, adding to the cemetery's reputation as a hotbed of paranormal activity. In the late 1800s, a tragic event took place within the cemetery, resulting in the loss of many lives. This event has been linked to the high levels of paranormal activity that have been reported in the area. The cemetery's dark history is a major contributor to its eerie atmosphere, and it's easy to see why so many people are fascinated by this place. As I delve deeper into the cemetery's history, I begin to uncover some fascinating stories about the people who are buried here. From tragic love stories to untimely deaths, each tombstone has a unique and captivating tale to tell. One story in particular caught my attention. A young woman who died under mysterious circumstances and whose spirit is said to still roam the cemetery. I came across a story from a visitor who claimed to have had a terrifying experience while exploring the cemetery. According to the visitor, they saw a ghostly figure standing beside a grave, and as they approached, the figure vanished into thin air. This story sends chills down my spine, and I can see why so many people are drawn to this place. The visitor's experience is just one of many that have been shared over the years, and it's easy to see why the cemetery has such a reputation. The story of this visitor's experience is a prime example of the creepy secrets that lurk within the cemetery's walls. It's a reminder that there's often more to a place than meets the eye, and that some secrets are better left unspoken. As I continue to explore the cemetery, I begin to realize just how many secrets it holds. As the sun begins to set, I take a moment to reflect on the stories I've uncovered. The Old Town Cemetery is a place of dark history and paranormal activity, and it's easy to see why so many people are fascinated by it. From ghost sightings to unexplained phenomena, this place has it all. The Old Town Cemetery remains a place of mystery and intrigue, with many of its secrets still waiting to be uncovered. If you've had a creepy experience in a cemetery or any other haunted location, be sure to share it with me in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story. The Mariana Trench, the deepest point on Earth, a scar on the planet's surface, plunging miles below the waves. It's a place of immense pressure, perpetual darkness, and unimaginable secrets. Our mission was simple: descend into the Hadal Zone, the deepest part of the trench, and study its mysteries. We were explorers, scientists, and adventurers driven by a thirst for knowledge and a desire to push the boundaries of human exploration. Our vessel, the Triton, was a marvel of engineering, a titanium sphere designed to withstand the crushing pressure of the depths. We felt confident, prepared, but nothing could truly prepare us for the abyss. As we descended, the light began to fade. The familiar blue of the ocean transformed into a deep, inky black. The pressure built steadily, a constant reminder of the tons of water above us. We were entering an alien world. Hours passed. The only sound was the hum of the Triton's life support systems. The digital depth gauge ticked down, each number representing another fathom deeper into the unknown. The tension inside the submersible was palpable. We were acutely aware of our vulnerability. A low groan resonated through the hull. The pressure was immense. We checked the sensors, our hearts pounding. Everything seemed to be holding. But the groan was a stark reminder of the forces pressing upon us. The abyss was testing us. The darkness outside was absolute, but our sonar and lights painted an eerie picture of our surroundings. Sheer rock walls rose thousands of feet above us, disappearing into the blackness. We were like insects crawling across the floor of a colossal, lightless cathedral. Then we saw it, a faint glow in the distance, bioluminescence. As we approached, the glow resolved itself into a dazzling display of light. Strange jellyfish-like creatures pulsed and danced around us. Their ethereal beauty was both mesmerizing and unsettling. Fish with translucent skin and oversized eyes darted through the gloom. Giant blind crustaceans crawled along the seabed, their antennae twitching. Life, bizarre and resilient, thrived even in this most extreme of environments. We were intruders in their world, but something else lurked in the darkness, something massive. Our sonar picked up a large, unidentifiable object moving slowly in the depths below. It was too large to be any known creature of the trench. Fear, cold, and primal gripped us. We watched in horrified fascination as the creature rose from the depths. It was colossal, dwarfing our submersible. Its form was indistinct in the gloom, but we could make out a massive whale-like body covered in what appeared to be thick, bony plates. Its movements were slow, deliberate, as if it were ancient, powerful, and utterly indifferent to our presence. The creature passed directly overhead, blotting out the faint light from above. We could hear a low, rumbling sound. The creature's calls, perhaps? Or the groaning of the earth itself? The hull of the Triton creaked and groaned under the immense pressure. We held our breath, our faces pale with terror. We were at the mercy of this leviathan, this denizen of the deep. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the creature drifted away, disappearing back into the abyssal darkness. We were left shaken, awestruck, and forever changed by our encounter. We had glimpsed something ancient and terrifying, a creature that had likely never been seen by human eyes before. It was a reminder of the deep ocean's mysteries and the humbling realization that we are but visitors in this alien realm.
The air at 10,000 feet over the sprawling, indifferent tapestry of the Alaskan wilderness usually held a certain comforting vastness for Elias Thorne. A seasoned bush pilot, Elias felt more at home in the cockpit of his aging de Havilland Beaver than anywhere on solid ground. Tonight, however, the familiar embrace of the sky felt like a tightening noose. The flight had begun routinely enough. A supply run to a remote mining camp nestled deep within the Brooks Range. The weather had been crisp and clear upon departure, but a low, ominous bank of clouds had begun to gather on the horizon, swallowing the last vestiges of the setting sun. Now the darkness outside was absolute, punctuated only by the occasional unsettling flicker of lightning in the distance. It started subtly, a whisper of resistance in the controls. Elias, a man whose hands knew the feel of his aircraft like a lover knows the contours of their partner's body, noticed it instantly. A slight stiffness in the yoke when he tried to make a minor course correction to the west to skirt the encroaching storm. He dismissed it initially, attributing it to a momentary air pocket or perhaps a bit of ice forming on the control surfaces. He'd dealt with far worse in his decades of flying. But the resistance persisted, growing more pronounced with each subsequent adjustment. It wasn't the expected friction of a worn cable or a stiff joint. This felt deliberate, like something was pushing back. A knot of unease began to form in Elias's gut. He ran through the mental checklist, his years of training kicking in. Trim was set correctly. Autopilot was disengaged, as it always was on these more challenging flights. He tried the rudder pedals. They felt heavy, sluggish, as if wading through thick mud. "Come on, old girl," he muttered to the Beaver, his voice a low rumble against the drone of the engine. He tried the ailerons, gently at first, then with more force. The plane responded unevenly, lurching slightly to the right, then hesitating before correcting. It was like arguing with a stubborn mule. The feeling of vastness that usually comforted him now pressed down, a suffocating weight. He was alone, hundreds of miles from civilization, with a storm gathering and his aircraft seemingly developing a mind of its own. The rhythmic thrum of the engine, once a reassuring constant, now sounded like a frantic heartbeat in the oppressive silence of the cockpit. He reached for the radio, his fingers fumbling slightly on the dial. He needed to report this, even if he couldn't articulate the sheer strangeness of it. North Slope Radio, this is Beaver 79er Alpha, do you read? His voice sounded strained, even to his own ears. A crackle of static was the only reply. He tried again, his voice louder this time, tinged with a growing urgency. Still nothing. The storm must be interfering with the signal. He was truly alone. The controls grew increasingly erratic. The yoke would suddenly stiffen, then give way with a disconcerting lurch. The plane began to pitch and roll without his input, as if caught in the grip of invisible currents. Elias fought back, his muscles straining, his brow slick with a cold sweat. This wasn't turbulence, this was something else entirely. He glanced at the instruments, his eyes scanning the dials for any indication of mechanical failure. Everything read normal, oil pressure, engine temperature, hydraulic levels, all within the green. There were no warning lights flashing, no alarms blaring. The Beaver, by all accounts, was functioning perfectly, except it wasn't. The thought, unbidden and chilling, slithered into his mind. What if it wasn't the plane? What if it was him? Was he having some kind of episode? A stroke? But he felt lucid, his mind racing, his senses heightened. He gripped the yoke tighter, his knuckles white, determined to maintain control. Then the plane did something truly terrifying. As he fought to level the wings after an uncommanded roll, the yoke suddenly twisted violently in his hands, pulling hard to the left. It wasn't a gradual movement, it was a sharp, forceful jerk, as if an invisible hand had seized control. Elias cried out, his breath catching in his throat. He wrestled with the yoke, his muscles screaming in protest, but it wouldn't budge. The plane banked sharply, the world outside tilting at a sickening angle. He could feel the increasing G-force pressing him into his seat, the engine roaring in protest. He fought with a primal fear now, the rational pilot replaced by a desperate man clinging to life. He kicked at the rudder pedals, but they remained stubbornly locked. He pulled back on the yoke with all his might, but the nose continued to dip, pointing them inexorably towards the dark, unforgiving wilderness below. The storm was upon them now, the plane buffeted by violent winds and torrential rain. Lightning flashed outside the windows, illuminating the swirling chaos of the clouds. In those brief, stark flashes, Elias caught glimpses of the jagged peaks below, rushing up to meet them with terrifying speed. He closed his eyes for a fleeting moment, a silent prayer escaping his lips. He had faced death countless times in his years of flying, but this felt different. This wasn't the cold, impersonal hand of fate. This felt malicious. Suddenly, just as abruptly as it had begun, the violent twisting stopped. The yoke went slack in his hands. The plane, still shuddering from the ordeal, leveled out somewhat. Elias gasped, his lungs burning, his body trembling. He cautiously tested the controls. They were still stiff, still resistant, but the violent, uncommanded movements had ceased, for now. He didn't understand it. There was no logical explanation for what had just happened. It was as if some unseen entity had briefly taken control, toyed with him, and then released its grip. The rest of the flight was a torturous exercise in vigilance. The controls remained unpredictable, requiring constant effort and minute adjustments to keep the plane on a relatively steady course. The storm raged around him, the darkness pressing in, and the silence on the radio was deafening. He finally saw the faint glow of the mining camp lights in the distance, a tiny beacon of hope in the overwhelming darkness. The landing was rough, the unresponsive controls making it a harrowing experience, but somehow, miraculously, he managed to bring the Beaver down in one piece. As the plane shuddered to a halt on the makeshift runway, Elias sat for a long moment, his hands still gripping the yoke, his body soaked with sweat. He was alive, but something had shifted within him. The sky, once his sanctuary, now felt tainted, imbued with a sense of unseen malevolence. Later, after recounting his experience to the bewildered miners, the mechanics would find nothing wrong with the aircraft. Every system checked out perfectly. There was no explanation for the unresponsive controls. Elias never flew that Beaver again. He tried, but the memory of that terrifying night, the feeling of an invisible force wrestling him for control of his own aircraft, was too vivid, too visceral. He sold the plane, the image of its wings bucking against an unseen pressure forever etched in his mind. He continued to fly, of course. The sky was in his blood. But he never looked at it the same way again. He knew, with a chilling certainty that defied logic, That sometimes, in the vast empty expanse above, there were forces at play that went beyond the known laws of physics, forces that could seize control without warning, leaving you alone and helpless against the unresponsive will of something else. And in the quiet solitude of the cockpit, high above the world, he would often find himself listening, straining to hear if there was anything else up there with him, anything that might decide to take the controls once more. The sky, he had learned, held secrets far more terrifying than any storm.